Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our virtual discussion with Constellation Research on getting back to work safely. I'm sure that 12 months back, if someone had asked anyone among us what our business plans were for August 2020, the picture and our response would have been very, very different from today's reality. Well, as it stands, we have a pandemic amongst us, and I'm sure you would have heard enough of it already. However, life must go on, and hence, here we are to discuss what next for businesses across the world to get back to life and recover the ground lost during the last 6 months. So, let us get started. In the meantime, we will also talk about how our new product, BackToWork, can aid you in the process of getting back to your physical workplace and accelerate your return to normalcy. So, first and foremost, let us set some ground rules. You will be on mute. Um, Please ask your questions through the questions tab on the left-hand side of your screen. We will have a dedicated Q&A towards the end, but we do have Pratik, my colleague, on the panel to help out with questions in the interim that comes into the chat panel. This will be an interactive panel discussion and slides will be used as placeholders. We have set up 3 questions to understand you better in the form of polls. So please do participate in it. It will help us drive the conversation better suited to your needs. And finally, the session is being recorded. So we would be providing a recording after once it's done. So a quick introduction to our panelists. We have with us Holger Mueller, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. He's a technology analyst and entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience in the field of technology. In his current capacity, he interacts with a lot of CXOs of organizations across the globe and advises them around topics of future of work, human capital management, tech optimization, and next generation apps. Good morning, and thank you for joining us, Holger.
Thanks for having me.
Great. A quick question for you before we get into the main discussion, right? I came across one of your quotes from the year 2017, where you said, enterprises will build more software in the next 10 years than they have in the last 30 years. Now, I'm sure when you said that, you had not accounted for a pandemic in the picture. So I am just curious as to where do you think that statement will lead to at this point in time? How do you think that the pandemic is affecting it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, I said that to give you the background, because what is happening is that business best practices for the modern infrastructure from the cloud, from smartphones, from infinite computing, as I call it, has not been considered yet in the best practices. Right now, technology can do more than what best practices how to run enterprise demand. And of course, nobody foresaw a pandemic at that scale, me included. But that means that now there's even a further change in best practice in regards of compliance, how to make people work safe, which also the software vendors have not foreseen. And that triggers a significantly higher need of enterprise to build more software again themselves. To give you a referral point, I always talk about we're back in the second mainframe age, right? If you remember the first mainframe age, back then, people would not have any software. They would buy the mainframe and they negotiated hard with IBM, who was a premier supplier. They would not get a discount on the hardware, right? How different is that to today, right? No discount on the hardware, but you would get developer years for free because IBM knew and the value of the mainframe will only come if you build software on this. And now we're in a situation where the new mainframe is the cloud, and you have to find ways to build software which fits your enterprise and helps them in this difficult situation.
All right. So uh, what I understand from that is that technology is going to play a huge role and probably an accelerated role because of the current situation, right?
Exactly.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Holger. Along with Holger, we have Tejas, technology evangelist from Zoho. In his role, he connects with customers across the globe and help them leverage technology in the right way for faster business results. Good morning and welcome to the session, Tejas.
Morning, Tribin. Thanks.
Great. So, Tejas, I have a question for you as well. From a software provider point of view, right? What is the biggest change you have seen in the last 6 months that is not about remote working? I mean, we all know remote working has kicked into probably the seventh gear right now. But then, apart from that, what is the change that you are seeing in your conversations with your customers, with organizations?
I guess it kind of ties into remote working, but it might be at a broader level of just general economic conditions, where I think most customers are really looking for a high value software or solution for whatever they're doing. I think they're realizing that there's a lot of options out there, and the costlier an option is might not have the same, or might have the same impact as a cheaper or more valuable solution on the market. So I think people are really reevaluating all of the tools in their software stack that they're using in their organizations, and I guess maybe figuring out where to cut corners or where to swap around to something differently. When times are good, you can pay higher prices and use, I would say, fancier software. But I think people are really just trying to get to the basics and get their work done, because remote working is one piece of it, but the overall downward trend of the economy and sales slumping across the board for a lot of people and a lot of organizations reevaluating their finances, I think value becomes an extremely important thing that people got to look at.
All right. So basically, more for less, even more important than it was before the pandemic, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. All right. Thank you, and welcome to the session, Tejas. And finally, you have me. I'm Tribin. I handle the role of a customer experience manager for Zoho Creator, a low-code application development platform from Zoho. And in fact, the Back-to-Work solution, the product that I spoke about in my intro, is actually built on Zoho Creator. So hence, I'm here. And in this panel, my role is that of a curious newbie, a noob. I'm trying to understand from both Holger and Tejas on where organizations stand and what they can do to counter the unprecedented situation at hand. And while we go with the discussion, I hope it will become insightful for you to realize or you to understand how you can, as people representing organizations, approach the whole situation that we have in our hand. Like I mentioned earlier, there are a couple of polls that I would want you to participate. It will get us a sense of the profile of audience that we have. So I'll launch two quick polls. I'll read it out, and then we can get started. All right. So the first question is, where is your organization in terms of getting back to work? Are you all cool? You're back in full swing, and the pandemic has not really impacted you much. You're slowly starting or finding your way back to work. There are teething issues. You are probably in the planning phase, and you're looking forward to getting back to work, both whether it's offline or online. And you are in a position where remote work rocks, and there is no plan to go back to office as of now. I'll give it about 10 seconds, and then I'll pop up the next question on tab. So, all right, okay. Where are we in terms of the results? Okay, so this is quite interesting. More than so approximately 60% of the audience who are here today and have voted are either in fully back in swing, fully back in office and working at full space. About of that 60%, roughly about 40% have teething issues or are looking forward to getting back to work. So that's a nice mix that we have, because there will be different aspects that we'll be covering with respect to getting back to work, which which all of you would find useful. All right, going into the next one, again a quick poll of the people who answered either 1, 2, or 3 in the previous question. This question is predominantly for you. How are you ensuring safety while getting back to physical work? Are you managing it manually using spreadsheets? You have an in-house quick fix app? You have already got a solution from the market, or you're looking for a plug and play solution? Again, about 10-15 seconds. Okay. All right. So this is again interesting. What I see from what has been responded is basically that about 50% are either managing manually or have used an in-house quick fix app. About 30% are looking for a plug and play solution. And about 20% are using some sort of solution from the market. So great. Okay, cool. So this will help us drive the conversation forward. I will quickly go back into the first section of our discussion. All right. So the world as is right now, where are we? Where do we stand? Where exactly are we? Right. So Holger, my first question is to you. How are your customer conversations right now? The pandemic has kicked in to its full flow. It's probably very different from how we started off in probably around about February or March. So how is the conversation right now? What are you seeing or what are you hearing from your customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Tribin. And I think it's important to understand what we've seen is that customers fall into three major segments, and all these segments have different needs, demands, and when it comes to technology and how to use it, right? And to make it catchy, they all start with an S, right? First of all, we have the super busy ones, right? Those are like the healthcare providers, the hospitals, essential business, basically, which have to be open to operate. We'll talk about what it means for them. The next one is I call the stutterers. The stutterers are the segment which can open in certain geographies, in certain cities, in certain places, under certain conditions, which are all different. They're on, off, they're closing, they're riding the waves, basically. And the third one is the sideline ones, right? The ones who can't do anything, right? A great example for the sideline ones are the airlines, right? Who are down to maybe 5 or 10% of their usual capacity. And all these three segments have very different needs in terms of technology. The super busy ones, they don't even have time to catch a breath and do something, right? They need to have any help from the outside to help them build something which they might need desperately, but they don't have. But they don't have capacity by themselves right now because they're just hoping that nothing breaks. The stutterers need something where they get more agile, where they understand how to empower, say, in retail or in food and beverage, if I'm a food chain and that's like local down to postal codes legislations. When can you open? How often do you have to sanitize? How do you have to space workers? How many customers can come into your store? How far do the tables have to be for outside seating and so on? They need a lot of different capabilities, which are kind of like not crowdsourced in terms of the crowd, but sourced down to the local managers who are holding together a location, a city, and know how to operate there. And the sidelined ones, they are super interested or very motivated to figure out how can I reduce my cost, right? How can I make sure that I'm not running out of business? And then thinking about, hey, can I come back in the same way how I used to do business, or do I need to reinvent myself and do things very differently? And what software do I need to support that? How do I train and make my people come up to speed for that and be ready for this? And what kind of IT infrastructure, software infrastructure do I need to come back as a totally different company? Because my existing business is not going to come back fast enough to sustain myself.
All right, got it. Thanks, Holger, for that. So it's great that you have already covered, uh, not exactly industry-wise, but then you have told the enterprise personas that are emerging out of this whole situation, right? Now, to take that a bit further right? What are the business functions, irrespective of the sectors that has been hit? Any pattern that is emerging that you are you're noticing, or is it just on a sectoral wise and not really from a business function wise?
Questions for me?
Yes, Holger.
Yeah. No, it's mostly the operational part, how to run your business, right? How do I say I'm a sideline, I'm an airline, right? How do I manage my furloughed workers and keep in touch on them operationally? How do I get the ones who are going to the few airplanes to fly and work on this, right? If I'm in manufacturing, how do I reach out to my employees? How to make sure that I know about where they are in their health status? Have they had COVID-19? Are they positive? Are they negative? How can they communicate this? How do I plan my shifts? If I'm from a store perspective, how can I predict what is going to be the utilization and demand at the location? How can I match that? So it's mainly the operational focus, because operations has fundamentally changed. It will have a ripple effect on other things like finance, HR, stock, and so on levels. But the immediate need right now is for that enterprises need automation improvement to operate and create the value which they're designed to do for their customers in this current difficult situation.
Oh, okay. So predominantly operations is getting a front seat in terms of all things related to improvement, related to capital, etc. So that is the driving force for most of the organizations, right?
Because if I cannot operate, I cannot create revenue. And if I don't create revenue, my days are numbered, right? So anything which gets you on an operational, acceptable level in these challenging conditions right now. Yeah. It has a huge people aspect, it has a huge operational aspect, has a compliance aspect, right? Different things there. And the sad part is none of the traditional operational software was made for that can deal with this, right? So.
Okay, got it. So Tejas, now Holger predominantly gave from his point of view, right, in terms of the conversation that he has been having with his customers from a product vendor, from a software vendor point of view. How has your customer conversations changed in the last 6 months? Does it resonate with what Holger is saying? I'm sure there will be overlap, but then is there any insight that you have seen from a demand point of view to software vendors, SaaS companies, etc.?
I mean, I think the way Holger broke down the three types of businesses is pretty spot on with what we see as well. The companies that are basically at a standstill have a lot different priorities than the ones who are trying to survive and unsure if they're going to bounce back or not. So the priorities of the two are very different. It kind of goes back to what I said earlier about across the board, everyone's looking for value, but depending on how your industry has basically been hit, determines if you're looking for point products that get you a solution as soon as possible and can get you up and running because there's a million things going on for you, or if you have like you're blessed and you can take a breather and reevaluate, all right, what are we doing organizationally, what can we fix, things aren't terrible for us but it is a little bit slow and we can use that time to rethink a lot of inefficiencies that might be in our organization. And so depending on how adversely your organization has been impacted, I would say the priorities really shift into the types of things you're able to do and the types of things you're able to look into. But across the board, I would say generally across all three different types of organizations that have been impacted, I think really increased communication is probably the key. So collaboration and communication being extremely important. Things that we were taking for granted before are now needing to be baked into almost every piece of software in order to work remotely or distributedly better together, essentially. And so that communication piece is extremely important, I think, and I think it's a good thing going forward, even whenever we return back to normal. The increased communication abilities and collaboration we'll have hopefully makes us all stronger later on.
Got it. Okay. So, Holger, to extend that question further, right? Collaboration and communication is one theme that is majorly impacting the strategic shift from organizations. Is there anything else that you're noticing? I know you mentioned about operations, but then anything specific that you're noticing within the operation realm or otherwise from other business functions as well?
Yeah, from great question, right? So obviously communication collaboration is essential because people are no longer showing up at work, right? With work from home parts, right? So you have to establish the first level of communication. The next level is that you have to do the operational planning to reopen your business, to run your business. So you need to know what people have, like I mentioned, if they have sick or not, have been sick or not sick, if they want to come back to work, if they can come back to work, if you think it's too risky for them to come back to work. And then operationally, when they come, can they all start at once? Do you have to socially distance them during that? Do you have to start working in shifts to be in compliance with that? What does it mean for what you can produce, right? Because if you restart opening, there's expectations in terms of revenue or when are products being shipped and billed for customers, right? What's going to be your output? So all this has dramatically changed. And the biggest challenge of this, right? Companies have been doing this on a much, much slower scale before because the typical economic cycle for economies have been 7 years. We've been very lucky that it has been longer than 7 years, right? But all the tools are like running on quarters, if you're lucky, on month, right? In this current situation now, if you're in the stutterer segment, which is affected by local regulations of opening, closing, shutdown, operating in a certain way, you operate on a 7-week and in extreme case on a 7-day cycle between notice to opening and closing again as the pandemic goes in these wave effects of opening closures, as we know very well. Like for instance, Singapore is on this, Hong Kong is on its 4th wave of closures right now. Singapore is on the 3rd one, right? Much of the Western world is just gone over the 2nd wave, right? And that makes it extremely critical that you have agile operational applications which can help you to create your value as an enterprise and put it on the road and put it in action to deliver revenue and value to your customers.
Right. So basically, it's all about adapting to survive, right? And that is where all the focus is. That's fairly correct, right?
Correct. Adapting is one way, but keep in mind, right, the sideline segment, you don't know when, say, it's a feasible example, right, when airline travel is going to bounce back. As an airline, I have to either shrink dramatically and then hope to regrow, or I have to look for other value propositions where I can make business, and there might be lateral, right? I like to do a lot of fitness. I like spinning on stationary bikes, right? And there's used to be like 2 separate areas in the market, right? The online providers, Peloton is the most prominent one. They would take people away from going into the spin studios, right? And it was very interesting to see when the spin studios where people were physically close to each other had to close originally, how quickly some of them adopted or saying, okay, lease the bike, rent the bike, and they switched over to digital streaming classes from their local single bike studio or multi-bike studio, or building apps for that, right? So the delivery value proposition has to change, and that means not just adapt, but also to create new things which help you to operate on your new value proposition if you do a pivot as an enterprise.
Got it. All right. So Tejas, I will take that question a bit further, right? Now, like we all agreed upon, there are three different personas, enterprise personas that we are looking at. How important is it to get back to physical premise? For the sidelined ones, there is no option, but for the other two, there is an option of either continuing from a digital point of view or getting back to office, right? So, what is your take on that? Is the impact of working in a physical environment going to diminish? Do you see that happening? What's your take on that?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the best way I heard someone say is through this remote stuff, we can pretty much survive. But I still think in-person communication and an in-person office culture in general will help an organization thrive. I mean, there's a lot of stories. I mean, for the past couple of months, you'll see some articles about some company going remote and things being great and peachy for them. But ultimately, face-to-face communication and stuff like that is what do you call it, unparalleled through some online meeting or a Zoom call or whatever it is. And so I think it is important to go back to the office at some point. I think the best part that's happened is we've exposed, or I guess experienced, a lot of companies that might have been extremely anti-work from home now understand that an employee can be productive at home, and it is okay if they need to take a day to like take care of their kids or run some errands, they can still manage their workplace. So it opened up a lot of opportunities for a lot of industries and companies that I would say are anti or adverse to work from home opportunities. And so in that sense, it'll help a lot of work-life balance in the future. But I still think in the long run, being able to go back to the office to get things done will definitely help productivity. I mean, I don't think there's any amount of tools or any magic tool online that's going to replace, human interaction. And I don't think we should try to. I think we should try to complement it as best we can.
Got it. So what it basically means is that we may have pushed the boundary of working digitally or remotely slightly, but then that is never going to overlap or rather take over the physical interaction that we have at work. That's a fair assumption, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so 4 months of a pandemic, or 6 months, depending how you want to count, or 8 months if you want to count, are not going to change 100,000 years of human development of interacting in person, right?
Yeah.
So there's no question about it. The question is, how much do you have to work around, and how much can you work around? And the fascinating thing about humans is we are extremely adaptable. Right? We're extremely adaptable. Right? We would never lay down to sleep next to a complete stranger, right? In our normal settings. But if we board an international plane, and sorry, I'm making so many airline travel examples here, and I'm not traveling much, we lay down against a perfect stranger with no problem, left and right, or sit next to them, whatever. Yeah, so we are very adaptable on the situation. So depending on, the other thing is depending on how long something changes, the quicker we adapt and get used to it and make the best out of it.
Right. Interesting. You brought out the adapt point of view, right? Because I was just going to talk about adoption in the next part, where see, typically when we address an issue, and this is across different verticals, different geos, and all those things, right? So typically when we address something of this scale, patterns tend to pop up. Patterns of organizations within organizations who are probably handling it better, and patterns from organizations who are not really doing that great. Are you seeing something like shaping up, or is it just too early for us to look for patterns with respect to the situation? Holger, the question is for you. Sorry.
Oh, sure. Patterns that definitely come up, right? And the most successful pattern creation is by looking at the companies who are doing well, right, and what they have done, right? Everybody wants to be like them at a certain point. The problem is that everybody is still in the same boat, which creates a tremendous opportunity of everybody being creative, right, in this difficult environment and finding ways out how to operate better, either as an existing company in the super busy segment, or how to find a better solution which you build to support your stuttering company, which is going on off in different locations because you're regionally dispersed, or which is on the sidelines right now and successfully managed to pivot, right, and figured out, for instance, a way to renegotiate their contracts to be all cloud-based and not pay for IT that they're not using, as an example, right? So these patterns are quickly emerging, I think, in these days, but they're not really clear at the moment yet.
Okay, got it. So, Tejas, I have a question for you with respect to the role of technology in itself. Right now, before the pandemic, there was a lot of focus on automation, on again from an operations point of view itself. But then there was a lot of focus on automation and things like that. I'm just wondering, due to the pandemic, has that focus gone down, or has it shifted shape? And automation is still required, but from a different context. So, what is your take on that?
I always think automation is good whenever you can to solve a problem and make people more efficient. The only change I would say that's happened a little bit more is I would say it's on the automation front. It's hard for completely automated systems nowadays because you still need some manual interventions here and there, and
Mhm.
so that piece kind of changes. It maybe goes back to what I mentioned earlier about kind of the ability to collaborate together. Um, Around an automation process or a process that's been automated to an extent to provide some insight and information about what's going on. So automation is definitely still the key, but there are other aspects to it that people are, I guess, looking at right now.
That's a great point. Quickly to jump in, but the automation imperative, right? The way to be more efficient, to accelerate for enterprises is the mandate, right? That's what you need to do anyway. That's what we've been doing. But what I see is that the automation sweet spot has moved down to less affordable and lower quality out automation as companies realize it's better to have a bad automation than have something not happening at all. Yeah, and that's it. That's the interesting shift. The sweet spot for automation is a trade-off between how affordable can I implement this and what's the quality of doing this has shifted down towards higher affordability. I'm ready to spend more. Lower affordability, sorry, I'm ready to spend more to get this done. And I also am ready to make more compromise on the quality of it because having something is better than having nothing.
Got it. All right. So now that we have established where organizations are, there is a shift in strategy and the role of technology in getting back. Let us drill deeper into the topic in itself, right? A few days back, I came across a very interesting quote from Brian Moynihan, who is the CEO of Bank of America and chair of the World Economic Forum's International Business Council. And he mentioned that the number one thing to focus on is employees and customers. When it comes to taking care of employees, the goal should be keep them well, keep them employed, and keep them mentally healthy. Now, I'm going to focus on the keep them well part, right? Because we are in a phase, probably we are at different stages across the globe, but we are in a phase where we are getting back to work wherever it's possible. And if we are not cautious at this point in time with respect to getting back to work, if we are not taking it seriously, the impact will be much larger than the initial lockdown or whatever impact that we have had till now. You restart your business and suddenly there is a patient in, and then you are almost going back to square one in terms of closing your business, making sure everyone is safe until a permanent solution comes in. That is a cycle we are going to be in. So it's extremely important for us to be cautious about getting back to work. Now, is where Zoho back to work comes into picture. Tejas, I'll ask you this question because you're the product expert over here. Can you tell a bit more about Zoho back to work for our audience to understand the different elements that one needs to be careful about with respect to returning back to work and how probably the product can help?
Yeah, definitely. So back to work has a couple different components to it. I would say the primary one that people are utilizing is a combination of wellness checks for employees as well as entry assessments, essentially. So they kind of go hand in hand. If employees coming into the office, we want to make sure that they haven't been around or exposed to anybody else with COVID. And if for whatever reason, unfortunately, that they are exposed to it later down the line, we can go back and backtrack and say, all right, on this day, everybody that was in the office, let's send them a notification to go get tested because someone tested positive. And so a good way to keep track and log things for all the employees that are coming in and making sure that they're safe and it is a safe and healthy place to come back to the office to get work done and to work better. I think it's extremely important. A lot of organizations either, I think part of the poll earlier was they might have some method in place right now, and it really varies based on a lot of regions. And so down to a city level or even parts of a city level, there could be higher rates or transmission rates going on. And so it is very situational based on where you live. but it really can't hurt to try to help and make sure your employees feel as safe as possible for coming back to the office. If they can manage without it, then and you're doing okay, then again, you don't have to send them to the office. But a lot of people, given being at home, and I think there's been a big uptick in just, I would say, mental health issues with people being kind of cooped up in a house, and they want to get to the office in order to get out, but you still want to give them a safe and good place to go to in their office. And so this application kind of helps you track all that kind of stuff. And then there's some additional stuff like tracking different like asset requests and maintenance stuff that goes on in the office, as well as maybe volunteer programs that employees might be organizing. But the real main part of it is wellness checks and making sure employees that come into the office are all screened properly. This way, if anything happens, we'll have a good record of it and we can inform everybody else.
Got it. So Tejas, I know you have a quick demo ready. I'll probably transfer the control to you right now. And why don't you take Holger and the audience through the demo that you have, and so that they can get a sense of what we are talking about.
All right. So what we're looking at right now is basically the administrator view of the home screen. And so this is where they can kind of just get a high level overview of what's going on. And on the left-hand side, we'll see a bunch of different components that we're going to access. And I'm going to kind of split these up into the top half, which is everything up to dashboards. And this top section right here is going to be for office administrators. So people who are maybe in leadership positions or operations or HR, the ones who are really just doing the configuration and setup of the application. I'm just going to skim over a couple of the main components here. So the first one is just setting up your workplace. And as you can imagine, an office could have different branches and different buildings within that office. And so here we've got a few different branches, a bunch of different cities in India. And then inside of each city, there might be multiple buildings, right? A tower building and a main building. So that's just to track where employees are. So if there is any kind of an outbreak, we know people in this building or this section were affected, and we can notify them all properly. The second piece that's important is going to be the wellness setup. And so this is going to be kind of where we define all the rules that employees need to follow whenever they fill out an assessment. We just set what day we're starting it at, how often we want to ask for an assessment. Some people ask for it every day. Have you been in contact with so-and-so? Have you experienced, high temperature? And we basically take a list of questions that, the CDC, WHO, and a couple other leading health organizations came up with, put them all together and have a form, and I'll show you what it looks like. And then a couple different pieces of information about when someone comes to the office. Do we want to make sure that they fill out an assessment? 9 out of 10 times, yes, you do want to, which is probably why you're using the app. And then it'll say, based on the day you entered, what type of transportation mode you had, and stuff like that. And then the last piece, in case anybody in your office is still traveling or has to travel and go somewhere, they can log in their travel records inside the application itself, and then they won't be able to come to the office for however long you set it for. And this way they put in a request and it'll say, oh no, you traveled to Florida or something like that 2 weeks ago, or to Texas or some other hotspot. And so you got to wait out your 2-week quarantine, and then you can go from there. And then whenever someone does submit a request to come in, there can be an approval process. So maybe certain admins or managers can approve if that person needs to come in. And that's the main part of it. The second piece is going to be actually adding your employees in. And so here, I'll have a list of actual employees that are imported already. Yeah, so we've got a couple list of 15 employees here, and then we can import employees as well. So we can bring them in from Zoho People or Bamboo HR or your Active Directory or wherever, or you can just import a spreadsheet if that's the easiest way to do it. People will have different administrative roles, and these roles will basically set what they can and can't do. So your admins can configure the application, branch managers can do things like approve and deny visitor requests, and then other administrators you can assign to individual employees. If you want to say Max should now be an admin, I'll just go ahead and click admin, and now Mr. Max is an admin. And so that's just an easy way to set up which employees have the rights and permissions to do certain things. Another simple one is going to be something like emergency contacts. And so if there is an issue in the office and someone needs to get a hold of somebody about something that happened, or maybe needing something cleaned or something like that, you can designate emergency contacts that'll show up. And the last piece I'll show you here on the admin side of things is just a communication setup. And so communication is kind of a way to send an easy blast through the application about some kind of announcement or development that's been going on. And so there can be just important announcements where everybody will get an email or a push notification about some kind of change or important update that's going on. There could just be notices of best practices that are happening. some policies that you have in place for security or entry requests. And then I don't have any here, but some safety documents and FAQs you can upload, and this way people can access them in order to, see the answers to frequently asked questions, as you can imagine. Then we've got a couple of dashboards built out here for administrators. And so these dashboards will show us kind of a high level overview of what's going on. So here you can see we've got wellness ratings, and the rest are all 0 because no one's checked into those locations. But for our Chennai, India office, we're at a 20, we're excellent. It'll show us the past assessments, and what their ranges are here. It still shows everything is fine. And then for safe entry, it'll tell us who's coming into the office, which building, which office location. So if I click on a different city, they're all going to be 0s. But if I go to Chennai, which I think there has some records, it'll show us, how many people checked in, how many people checked out. For some reason, people are checking in and never leaving here. We're not allowing any visitors, so those are all 0. But basically, when they fill out that wellness assessment, if their score is good, there'll be a 20, and that number will come down. And I'll add an entry here in a second for bringing that number down. And then I'm going to show you this. And so here is what a regular employee would see, or not an administrator. And so this is my man, Peter Gibbons, over here. And you can see his left-hand section looks a lot slimmer because it's just going to show information that an employee really needs to access. And this is the employee dashboard that they see. So they have, quick links to a bunch of important pieces of information, all the communication items that I showed up here or previously from the admin screen, a couple of safe entry stuff, and then assessment programs and travel history, things that they can do. And then those emergency contacts that I mentioned earlier are just available a little bit lower. So I'm going to go over here to the wellness section, and I'm going to create a self-assessment first. And my self-assessment looks a little bit like this, where it says, have you tested positive? Nope. Do you live with people under 5 or over 60? Nope. Have you been in contact? Not that I know of. Are you experiencing any, symptoms? No. Visited the hospital? No. Do you live in a hotspot, containment zone, or sealed off area? No. I say all my stuff is good, and that's pretty much my information. So it'll tell me that this was my last assessment, and then the rules that I designated from the administrator point of view, if I go to my organization setup and wellness, it says that every 3 days, was it said? Oh no, daily. So then tomorrow I'll be able to fill it out again. Now that I filled it out today, I don't need to do it anymore. I can see a list of my past assessments, which is not going to be, it's only going to be 1 for here for today. If I traveled somewhere, let's say I went to somewhere, so I can say from the 3rd to the 14th, I was in Austin, and let's say I went to Orlando to watch. And so now that I've entered that in, based on my settings over here, I can say someone who has traveled recently for 2 weeks, after they come back, I won't be able to come into the office. If I want to actually come into the office one day, I would say my safe entry over here on the left-hand side. And let's say I want to go to a different office. I'll go to Goa, and there's no buildings in Goa, so that's weird. I'll click on a different city, and I'm going to take a private car. I'm not taking public transport or carpooling with anybody. And I want to go in on, let's say I can't go in the past, right? So let's say I want to go in on the 24th. Today's the 24th. So let's say I want to go in on Wednesday and until Friday. So I'll click submit, and then every time I try to go into the office, right now I'm rejected. So there's a reason for me being rejected in accordance with company policy. And so I can change those comments, and basically it's because of that travel stuff. Because I got back less than 2 weeks ago, it's not going to let me come into the office because I haven't waited my 2-week quarantine yet. If I am approved, let's say we go ahead and make another request here and say we want to go in next month. So I'm going to say we're going to go in September, let's say 14th to the 18th. That week I want to go to the office. I'm going to go to the main building and click submit. This one won't be rejected. You can see it's approved because there was no travel violation or anything like that. And when that day comes, this QR code button is going to be enabled. So I can either use the mobile app on my phone. If I just go to the App Store for Apple or Google and search for Zoho BackToWork, there's an app I can log in, and there'll be a QR code generated, and I can easily scan it, and it'll allow me entry into the office that way. A couple other small sections here that I'll wrap up with is going to be asset requests. It's a very small, if you have a smaller organization, this might be something that's helpful for you. But let's say something was broken at home, maybe my charger, maybe my monitor, something like that, and it'll let an admin or a local office person be able to handle those small little asset requests that pop up just because someone probably is spilling something on something at home. And so things are going to break or need replacement. And it's an easy way to do this. If you need full-fledged asset management, there's other solutions out there for you, but this is just a simple way to kind of manage them in one place. And then maintenance requests are pretty similar to asset requests where you can say in a certain place, like the main building of where I am, maybe we need a sanitization of a table, maybe we need a cleaning certain area or something happened. We can just put in a maintenance request, and again, that will get forwarded to an administrator who can take it up with building maintenance or handle it themselves however they want to. And the last piece, I can just see here a list of the communications that have already been put out. I would have got a push notification for it, but instead I can just see a list of all the different things that have happened. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I would say it's not really overkill. We try to keep it pretty simple and not too overwhelming for people. But the main parts you're really going to use here is just these dark green sections for safe entry. Visitor safe entry, you don't really need to worry about. That's just if non-employees are coming into the office, they can fill it out. And then the approval happens either through an iPad or a receptionist, whoever you have at the front, in order to process that approval and let somebody in. But yeah, that's a super quick, super high level overview of the application. I think we have a couple of videos on YouTube that go into a little bit more depth, but that should give you an overview of kind of what BackToWork really is, if that helps. Any questions, Sherman or Holger?
Thanks, Tejas. I'm pretty clear. Holger, from your end?
No, it looks compliments on the UI, right? I mean, it's super important that people don't stumble about UX issues using this, right? So I think it's just very intuitive and easy to use, right? You don't want to run people through 2 days of training so you can get to your BackToWork app. So well done.
Thank you, Holger. Thank you. So, Tejas, I'll get the permission back so that I can share my screen. All right. Is my screen visible? Holger, the question was for you around this. Now, technology is always an enabler, right? So, while an organization can use technology to ensure as much as possible everything is taken care of, what are the pitfalls or caution areas that you think organizations would be facing in returning back to work in general after the pandemic?
Great question. So, I mean, technology cannot have a self-service, right? Technology for technology's benefits is useless, right? It has to help your enterprise to accelerate, to move faster, become more agile in these difficult times, right? It has to aid your users with specific focus on which I tell enterprises all the time. It's important you enable employees, of course. People are important in general, but really, if you want to operate in the new normal or if you're in a shift strategy, forget the pandemic for a second. You need to empower, you need to enable the first and second level managers, right? Those are the people who move the bulk of your biggest investment in most enterprises, which are your people. And if you support those well, then good things will happen and follow, right? Obviously, you don't want to spend too much on it, right? Depending if you're super busy, you don't have time to do a selection. The stutterers might have a chance to have a selection because they might be on the sideline, but then they might be called back to work and not have the capabilities for that. And the sidelined ones really look to a cost-effective solution which will help their business.
Got it. And Tejas, anything that you perceive coming through from a caution point of view, something that organizations should be really cautious about?
I would say to be cautious about everything. Safety is extremely important and shouldn't be taken lightly. So everything should be extremely cautious, especially when you're coming back to the office.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So with that, we will move into the Q&A part. And after the Q&A, there is a small poll, and then we conclude the whole session. So I'll take questions that we have received. The first question that I have to Tejas actually would be, what happens to the BackToWork app once things get back to normal? This is a very situational app at this point in time, right? A product that is very tailored to the situation that we are in right now. Tejas, how do you see that evolving, Tejas?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, I'm not sure anybody knows what really normal is. I think we're going to see a lot of people who have a heightened sense of caution and security around personal hygiene and just general transmission of any kind of disease. And people are going to have some inherent fears for, I think, a really long time that aren't going to go away. And so when things are, quote, normal, and let's say, God willing, that there's a vaccine that comes out and everybody takes the vaccine and 100% everything is fine and dandy, then you can just stop using it. Obviously, that's the easiest way to do it. But I think going forward, long term, this app itself might not be a long term installation in an organization, but I think some variant of this, not specifically COVID related, but just generally health related, we could see that implemented across a lot of different offices over time, where if a visitor comes in, we want to make sure that that person is safe and healthy before we expose them to our employees. I think people are just going to be paranoid and scared for a while, and honestly for good reason, because we don't really know what to expect in the future.
All right. So, Holger, from your point of view, how do you see it coming through? Do you resonate with what Tejas was saying, or do you see it evolving into a larger app? And I'm not talking just about back to work, but then in any solution that any organization implements at this point in time to tackle this particular pandemic, how do you see that evolving in future?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a wake-up call for enterprise to realize they need to up their game in terms of how they communicate, work with their employees, and operate, right? So now they have the excuse potentially or the need to do this because of social distancing and so on. But in general, it will be good for the workplace to know who's working better with each other, who's sitting close to who might have an issue with someone working there, what are the most efficient ways of working from a collaboration perspective, from a distance perspective, and so on. So I think if we will reach a new level of awareness and importance of operational things, and it's unfortunate that it took a pandemic for enterprise to wake up to it, but I think that's the key lesson learned, that we will never be as bad from an operational perspective from getting people to work together and coming back to work safely and where they work and how they work and what they work than we've ever been before. That's my hope, and I think that's going to happen.
Great. Thank you for that, Holger. The next question that we have is about data privacy. So the way organizations see it as is we were in hyphen state in terms of data breach, data security, etc. Right? And back to work or an application, an additional application gets added to that. So what is your take on that? How does back to work, Zoho back to work, cater to data privacy? So that's the second question that we have. Tejas, I think it would be best if you take this up.
Yeah, I'll take that. So, I mean, at Zoho, we take privacy extremely seriously across all of our applications for all of our customers. And in the back to work case, it's extremely important just because it's kind of like health data, and we want to make sure that everyone's identity is protected and there's nothing wrong. And so one thing you noticed that I never showed you during the administrator walkthrough was there's no way for an admin to see exactly who's affected or who's quarantined or anything like that. The application manages all of that privately in the back end. And so we just know the employee knows that they've been rejected from coming in based on the policies or whatever their wellness score. But an administrator or an office manager or even the super admin can't see a list of employees' wellness reports, for example. And that's because we don't want the employees' privacy to be compromised and have their health data be viewed by somebody else. And so that kind of double blind data sharing where the logic is applied, but nobody can actually see the answers themselves is the easiest way to kind of handle the privacy piece. But I think privacy is an important part with this, and whether you're looking at this solution or another solution out there, employee privacy is something that you should always consider and have at the forefront, because you don't really know where that data is being stored or who it's being shared with or anything like that. So you want to make sure and ask those questions to know that nothing's getting exploited or being used without your explicit consent.
Got it. Holger, how do you see privacy being tackled in general? I mean, how important is it going to get with respect to the current scenario?
Yeah, no question. I agree with Tejas. So privacy is very important. You need to have secured, professionally built applications for that. You can't just do that on a napkin or something like this, because who knows who gets a napkin. On the other side, I want to make you aware, don't be too much afraid of the privacy side. If you have to build something which helps your company operate, you will get the privacy part added later. So I don't want to encourage you to do intrusions on the privacy side, but it's more important to have an enterprise which can operate than be a total slave to privacy concerns and questions, because way too many times I see that the value creation process and building good software to support your business is going to slow down by the general compliance aspects of this, that you can't do this, except as an excuse. Because we see right now that privacy things which were granted before are completely thrown out the window, right? So medical history, if you had COVID or not, nobody's even debating that you need to share this, right? But before, if you had an infectious disease, you didn't have to necessarily share it depending on the country, as an example, right? You see the tracking of locations of people, and there's no discussion that you have to do this, right? So a lot of the privacy current standards are going to be rewritten, and you have to be very careful not to look at the old standards while the new standards are being morphed. And most importantly, you need to keep in mind, how can you operate your business safely and successfully, and then take care of privacy.
Got it. Thanks for that, Holger. Another question that we have is, what about other safety parameters like social distancing, wearing a mask, etc., by the employees? Any way of ensuring this? Can we do that on the app, Tejas?
I mean, I guess the app can't really make somebody wear a mask or social distance. I mean, we can send out the communications and best practices and encourage people to do so, but the app itself can't force people to do anything outside of entering information.
That's a great privacy question, right? Because technology exists, right? You can people getting taking pictures when they come in. You can show in compliance everybody came in with a mask. Now, if they kept them on, right, there's a 360-degree cameras which can realize, oh, people have something in their face, right? But if it's a piece of paper or mask, we don't know either, right? And then again, we have the privacy question of this, right? So, but I think privacy will be thrown out the window, and you see that in some of the Asian countries already, where the public cameras are flagging people who are not wearing masks for cops to go after them, right? So it's really an interesting situation where technology can do things which before we were all worried about face recognition and how bad it can be, and now at least a number of legislative countries are already happy to use face recognition, not really for face recognition, but for mask recognition, right? So this is very, very quickly developing.
That's very interesting. Face recognition has actually would have to really pivot very soon, and like you mentioned, companies are already working on that. So that's great to know. One final question.
There's only eye recognition, maybe hair color recognition, right, or forehead recognition. Yeah. It's the face is recognizable, right?
Right. All right. One final question before we go into the conclusion part, right? And it's a two-part question, Tejas. This is for you, and it's very specific to Zoho BackToWork. Is the Zoho BackToWork mostly written on HTML or ZML within Zoho Creator? And the second part of that question is, will BackToWork work on an offline mode if the internet is down?
Yeah, so I'll take the second question first. So yes, it does work in offline mode. If you're using the mobile app, you can still enter all your information in. If you're using the desktop variant, you do need an internet connection because it is a web-based app. But on the mobile version, it is available offline, so that's a non-issue. And then the first question was how the application was built. It's built everything that anybody else could build out in Creator. There's nothing really special, I would say, that we did, or there's no secret hacks or tricks that we used to build it on the Creator platform. So if somebody wanted to recreate the app themselves, they would have all the tools available at their disposal. And so it is a combination of ZML and HTML for some of the pages and the dashboards, but otherwise it was all normal functionality. No special features were introduced in order to have this be built. Anyone can create it themselves if they wanted to.
Yeah. So we have a few more questions in the panel, but then in the interest of time, we will be responding to it via email. I will be reaching out to everyone who has posted a question. Quick poll with respect to the platform itself, and we can get into the final conclusion. Now, the question, whatever we have spoken is about what has happened and how we can cater to it right now. The final words, I think, should be looking forward into the future. So, Holger, I'll ask the question to you first. How do you see this shaping up businesses when we are in 2025? Looking back, will this be just a blip in the road, or will this be a diversion, a complete pivot that happened? How do you see that panning out?
Great question. I think we'll be dealing with this, unfortunately, much, much longer, right? I mean, it all depends on when is the vaccine there, how will the vaccine be there, but then on the flip side, we don't know how it morphs, right? Close related, the flu virus every year morphs to something else. We don't even know if SARS-CoV-2, which is a medical term, is morphing. So, and we're going to remain a global society, right? Borders can't be shut down. We cannot go back. Economies cannot operate on being locked down in a single country, single state. That's impossible. So it's going to be international travel, international transport, and we have to find a way to how successfully work. And it comes back to what it always mattered for companies, right? We looked at the stock indices around the world in every country. Significantly amount of companies, like 52 of the S&P 500 in the US, are gone in the last 18 years, right? Not necessarily gone because they don't exist as a company, but they didn't grow fast enough, right? So the adaptability of companies and the ability to accelerate, to move faster than the competition, move faster than your markets is key. And technology enables that, right? So you have to look for technology platforms, for software platforms, which allow your enterprise to move faster than the change of rate in the markets that you're in, right? That's the key aspect of this. So, and that's the takeaway which was there before COVID, and that's the takeaway after COVID, only that it's even more urgent.
Got it. That's something to look forward to. Tejas, your closing comments on this question?
I think Holger took my thoughts right out of my brain, basically. No, I mean, for the most part, I would say looking at safety opportunities, going back to the office is important. Be smart, be safe about what you do, and really just be cognizant of what's going on, and really just be safe. I guess at the end of the day, ask questions and understand what the implications are. There's not really much anyone else can say, but try to contain this, and I think there will be long-term impacts of it. I mean, for years to come. Like I said, I think a lot of trust is going to be eroded for a lot of people, and fear and paranoia about these types of diseases now, and I think this will make us better prepared for the future ones that hopefully don't come. But if they do, at least we'll have some experience under our belt and know how to handle them better in the future.
Great. Sure. So looking forward to that. That's it from us, folks who joined in. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any queries related to Zoho Back to Work, please drop in an email on mike.a@zohocorp.com. The ID is on the screen. We will be sharing a recording of this session. We have missed out on responding to quite a few questions, so be assured that we'll get back to you via email on all of those. And once again, thank you very much, Holger and Tejas, for taking your time out and keeping this lively and interactive. It was a pleasure to be on the panel from my side, trying to understand how you guys are thinking and how you guys perceive it is going to shape up in the near and future. So thank you very much for joining in. Stay safe, everyone. Cheers. Have a good day or night, depending upon where you are. Thank you very much.
Samir, thanks for having me.